Joining us now, MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. Susan Page is USA Today's Washington bureau chief. Stuart Stevens was chief strategist for Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign and is a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. Susan, raising the specter of the 25th Amendment and replacing a president hasn't been seriously talked about really since the Nixon era. Is this talk serious now?
Well, the 25th Amendment is designed to be difficult to do. It would require the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to make a written declaration to Congress that the president was no longer able to carry out his duties. And if the president protested, you'd have to have 2/3 of the House and Senate affirm that he was not capable. So that's a bar that seems very unlikely to be met, starting with the Vice President Vance leading that way. I think it is more of a talking point for Democrats than it is for an actual threat of action. If Democrats are really serious about it, they could win back the House in November and talk about impeachment. But until then, the 25th Amendment, as I said, I think more of a talking point.
So, Stuart, former Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says, quote, everyone in Trump's administration that claims to be a Christian needs to fall on their knees and beg forgiveness from God and stop worshiping the president and intervene in Trump's madness. He has gone insane and all of you are complicit. Maybe a better question beyond the 25th Amendment is there a point where you see more current congressional Republicans questioning that the threats and the actions that the president is taking in regard to Iran?
Man, I wish I could say I did, but I don't. It's extraordinary to wake up and be agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way. But she's calling this exactly right. Look, with the 25th Amendment, I just got to say, if you were teaching a course on the 25th Amendment, and you said, okay, what if you woke up on Easter and the President of the United States was threatening major war crimes against a huge country using profanity? Would that be evidence? I think, pretty much the class would go, yeah, that'll never happen, but sure, of course. Look, I think that Republicans made this deal with the devil. And what they forget about Mephistopheles is not only does he not deliver, not only does he take your soul, but he doesn't deliver. So they're headed for a disaster now that should be a disaster. It is the best thing that could happen for the country. I say that as someone who worked in the Republican Party for years. But this president is truly out of control. And what is the most extraordinary thing about that message is not that he wanted to send it, but that there was no one there who could stop him. And I think that just speaks to the level of chaos inside the White House and the administration.
Well, let me take it to Capitol Hill. Michael, the profane threats come during federal budget season. So how does war funding play into those conversations, and what are you hearing from lawmakers?
Yeah, well, Chris, one more note first on that Easter message from the president. It's been an onslaught of Democrats pushing back on the sentiment from the president, with far and few Republicans, Marjorie Taylor Greene being the biggest name, and she's not even in Congress anymore. But I will tell you, this morning I spoke to Congressman Don Bacon. He's a moderate Republican from Nebraska. He is retiring, and he did push back on some of the comments from President Trump. I asked him about that Truth Social post. He told me, quote, we expect more from the president in setting a better example, specifically pointing to the profanities and the vulgar language, on the president using the term Allah and the praise and the phrase praise be to Allah. He said, quote, I don't think it's appropriate. And I pressed Don Bacon on this threat of action that could become war crimes. He said, quote, there's mixed opinions on it. I got mixed feelings on it. So certainly a bit of a tepid pushback from a Republican, but something when we have not heard from many members of the GOP in response to that Sunday post from the president. But getting back to your initial question about war funding, there are rumors, reports that the Pentagon is going to be requesting about $200 billion to go towards the Iran war. And now, while there are going to be several Republicans who are ready to line up behind the president, some folks have questions, and they're saying that they want answers before they vote for any funding for this war. Take, for example, what Senator John Kennedy said. He has said, quote, if our troops need more money, I want to give it to them, but I want to see the details. You got to show me the candy before I'll get in that car. Similar from Congressman Thomas Massie saying, quote, it begs the question, how long do they expect the war to go on? It's been about $1 billion a day, and they want $200 billion. My quick math says they think this will go on for at least 6 months. So some Republicans not immediately quick to give the administration what it wants. And this is all significant because there are discussions among Republicans amid this Democratic opposition of passing this Iran war funding through a process that's known as budget reconciliation. Essentially, to allow Republicans to circumvent that Democratic opposition. But as a byproduct, it requires near unanimity from all Republicans. We know that in both the House and the Senate, Republicans are hanging on to their majorities by a very slim thread. This is already hitting the campaign trail. There are some Republicans who are saying that they want to see cuts in other areas of the government to pay for this Iran war funding. That already receiving some pushback. For example, take a look at what former Congressman Mike Rogers said, who's running for Senate in the state of Michigan. He said this is not the way in response to a story about cutting health care for paying for this Iran war funding. He continues by saying our priority needs to be making life more affordable for working families, from health care to housing, not making cuts at the expense of American people. While I'm all for cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, this is a bridge too far. So, Chris, all of that to be said, a lot of divisions, concerns in the Republican Party about not just Iran and what the president and the administration is doing in the region, but also this potential funding that can come down the pipe soon. A lot more discussions to keep an eye on as this conflict continues to unfold.
Yeah, and I guess part of the question, Stuart, is going to be whether Massie and Kennedy are going to stand alone, or if some of the folks who are in tough races, who are in purple districts, who are getting a good challenge, may decide that they need to say something and maybe take a page of affordability and not give the president what he wants.
Yeah, I just got to say there's something extraordinary about Senator Kennedy basically making a pedophile joke about funding the war in Iran. It sort of brings together the Epstein files and the war in Iran, that unless he gets the money, showing the candy to get in the car. I just think it shows where this party is.
He's always been colorful. That's for sure.
Well, there's a lot of ways to go before you go there. I think Freud might have something to say about that. Look, I think the threshold here is once somebody helps inspire a mob to come into your workplace and try to kill you, and you're still okay with that, are we really kidding ourselves that there's going to be some line of policy here that they're going to cross? Like, that's too much on the law of the sea treaty, or, no. Republicans bought into this. And if they're not going to stand up to somebody who physically was threatening them with the supporters, for heaven's sakes, no. And we've never seen a collapse of a party like this, certainly in modern history. And I can't tell you when it's going to end.
Susan, I'm sure you've been following some of the polls, and you see the movements in the races that are going to decide certainly control of the House and some pretty tight ones in the Senate as well. I wonder if you think there's a point essentially in the midterm calendar, and maybe we haven't reached it yet, where Republicans are going to, especially again in swing districts, reevaluate blanket support.
I think a lot of Democrats and independents and traditional Republicans have been waiting for that moment for some time with Donald Trump. And one reason I think we haven't reached it yet and may never reach it, not even before the midterms, is that for a lot of these Republican candidates, it's kind of an existential choice between defying President Trump and having him come down on you in a way that is very unhelpful to your reelection, or breaking with him, which is something very few Republicans have chosen to do. I mean, here we're discussing whether Republican members of Congress will stand up to President Trump on funding the war in Iran. They have not yet had a hearing, a single hearing in Congress in the past month about what we're doing in Iran, what our goals are, what the future of that war is. So I guess I would not hold my breath, Chris.